Mammy's Tug of War. Mammy's Tug of War Part 1. Iona Barrage's Determined, Resilient, Purposeful Life. By Dr. Sheila Hodge-Windover. Copyright 2026 by Drive Sheila Hodge-Windover. P.O. Box 7990. Lawton, Oklahoma 73506. www.drhodgewindover.com. www.unravelred.com. www.mindheartandsoul.com. www.drhodgewindoverinstitute.com. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying, recording, or other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the publisher, except in the case of brief quotations embodied in critical reviews and certain other non-commercial uses permitted by copyright law. Dedication. This book is dedicated to all of Mammy's children, siblings, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces, nephews, cousins, and friends. Acknowledgements. To the author of all life and the keeper of our stories, all glory and honor be to God. This book is a testament to a life well lived, a love deeply felt, and a legacy that demanded to be recorded. It was a sacred charge placed upon my heart, and I am humbled to have been its scribe. My first and most profound gratitude goes to my sisters, my partners in this journey of remembrance. To my youngest sister, Debbie, my first reader and most devoted editor, your unwavering partnership from the very first draft in February 2023, just 1 week after our mother's passing, gave this project its wings. Your sharp eye, steadfast encouragement, and shared grief have been its foundation. To my oldest sister, Beverly, our family's truth and peacekeeper, thank you for your vital role in ensuring every memory was anchored in accuracy and love. This work is built upon the bedrock of our family's collective history. I am eternally grateful to our Uncle Densmore, whose priceless sharing of our Mammy's paternal family's history provided the roots of this story. My heartfelt thanks also to Auntie Elvira for her diligent work in verifying the intricate details of our paternal family's lineage. To my cousins, Yvonne, Morvette, Tovia, and Yvette, thank you for illuminating the branches of our maternal family tree, confirming the stories that made our mother who she was. I must also extend my gratitude to the visionary mentors who saw a writer in me long before I dared to believe it, Delcia Bradley King, the brilliant Jedediah Blake, and Dr. James W. Sutton. You nurtured that seed with unwavering belief, and for that, I am forever changed. No writer journeys alone. My deepest thanks go to my steadfast support team, my early readers and cherished friends who championed my writing project from its earliest, roughest drafts: Marita Tyrell Mitchell, Diana Francis, Athel Davis, Denise Metsimula, Billy Troy, Shanti Hubbard, and Winston Thompson. Your feedback is always invaluable, and your encouragement was the wind in my sails. A special and heartfelt note of gratitude goes to Mutris Warner. Thank you for brainstorming with my sister Debbie over the graphs for the book cover for Part 2. Your ideas added a new dimension of elegance and excitement to this project, and I am so grateful for your partnership in that essential piece of the journey. To all of you named here, and to the many whose paths have blessed my own, you have been God's hands and feet on this journey. I carry a piece of each of you in these pages, which stand as a lasting tribute to our matriarch, Iona Constantia Barrage, a woman whose love continues to write its story upon all of us. Contents. Chapter 1, The House of Farrell 12. Chapter 2, Uprooted to Nevis 19. Chapter 3, 27. Chapter 4, War on the Horizon 46. Chapter 5, Paternal Family 68. Chapter 6, An Unstable Horizon 93. Chapter 7, Maternal History 99. Chapter 8, The Borrowed Child 108. Chapter 10, Maternal Relatives 114. Chapter 11, Summary and Conclusion 125. Book Club Questions 132. Introduction. The story begins with a theft. It was not a theft of jewels or gold, but of a future. The year was 1938, on the beautiful island of St. Kitts, a slumbering green giant born of volcano and violence. The ghosts of sugar barons still walked the ruins of great houses, and the sugar cane fields whispered of fortunes built on broken backs. In Spooner's village, Caen, in a house built not of wood or stone, but ingeniously, desperately, from the very cane that enslaved the land, a baby girl was born into a quiet kind of legend. Her mother named her Iona Constantia Tyrell, but before she could know her name, the world showed her its teeth. At 6 months old, her mother, Gwendolyn Tyrell, was gone. The official word was death. The village whispers spoke of something else, a beauty too radiant, a jealousy too deep, and the old, dark arts that thrived in the lush shadows of the island. Her mother was not just dead, she was erased. No photograph, no grave a daughter could visit. Only a mystery and a stain of suspicion that would cling to Iona's childhood like the humid air. Sheltered by her formidable grandmother in that cane-walled sanctuary, Iona's world was one of earth floors swept to perfection and the sweet, decaying scent of harvest. It was a fragile piece. Then the man came. He arrived not with a smile, but with a claim. Ernest Libbard, her father, a figure from across the dangerous, glinting channel that separated Street Kitts from its sister island, Nevis. He had come to collect what was his. At 1 year and 8 months old, Iona Tyrell was taken. Gently lifted from the only love she had known, she was carried to the waterfront to a waiting boat. She did not walk onto that vessel. She could not walk, so she was carried. As the green peaks of St. Kitts receded, she was delivered into the embrace of Nevis, the Queen of the Caribbees, an island of cloud-capped beauty and profound isolation, of healing hot springs and unspoken hardships. What happened to this little girl on that island? Here, the record fractures. The clear light of her Kittitian infancy dims into the uncertain mist of a Nevisian childhood. We know she was placed in the home of her paternal family. We know a fierce Aunt Isabel entered her life. We know her father eventually had a new wife, new children, and a new vision for his firstborn daughter. But what became of her? Did she find love, or merely a new kind of duty? Was she nurtured, or was she put to work? The next years are a locked box. A silence filled only with ominous clues, the scar of a later, violent struggle referred to only as the tug of war, a single, precious dress made from a tablecloth, the haunting phrase, a child taking care of a child. Something happened in Nevis. Something that would either break a spirit forever or forge it into unbreakable steel. A battle was fought there in the green heart of that beautiful, isolating island over the soul of a little girl. A battle between the future and the past, between the classroom and the cradle, between a father's will and a daughter's right to dream. The outcome was not certain. The cost was not yet known. All we know for sure is that a girl crossed the water. And when she finally migrated back onto the soil of St. Kitts years later, she was not the same. She carried a secret strength, a hidden sorrow, and a new name beginning to echo around her, Mammy. But how did she earn it? What did she survive? To understand the formidable woman she became, you must first venture into the lost years. You must cross to Nevis, step into the quiet house, and discover what they tried to make her, and what she ultimately decided to be. Turn the page. Unlock the silence. Chapter 1, The House of Pharaoh. Every epic needs a stage where heaven and earth collide. This one begins on a pair of emerald jewels set in a sapphire sea, the sister islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. Born of volcanic fire, they rise with a defiant, lush beauty, their peaks cloaked in whispering rainforests that hold the secrets of the ancient Kalinago people who first named this land Liamwiga, fertile land. This is a place steeped in a potent alchemy of breathtaking beauty and profound sorrow, where fortunes were once wrung from the soil on the backs of the enslaved, and resilience is written into the very rock. It was here, in the spring of 1938, as the world teetered on the brink of a devastating war, that a different kind of history was quietly ushered in. In the heart of Spooner's Village, within the storied town of Caen, St. Kitts, a legacy drew its first breath on the 13th of April, 1938. It began not with fanfare, but with the fragile cry of a baby girl named Iona Tyrell. History would know her by many names: Iona Libbard, Iona Barrage Ine. But to the many who would eventually know the depth of her love, she would be known simply and powerfully as Mammy. Yet, from its very first breath, her life was touched by tragedy. At just 6 months old, Iona was left motherless. Whispers clung to her mother Gwendolyn's absence, not just of grief, but of something darker. Murmurs of a stunning beauty, of long, flowing hair, and of a jealous, local magic that could target such a gift. Was it a tragedy or a whispered crime? The mystery would hang unresolved, haunting the cane walls that sheltered her. She found refuge in the care of her maternal grandmother, Louisa Farrell, a matriarch as sturdy as the Kittitian cane itself. Their home was a humble structure crafted from the very crop that defined the island's destiny sanctuary, where the dirt floor was swept to pristine perfection, its walls absorbing whispers of struggle and unyielding hope. The House of Earth and Cane. To understand Mammy's roots is to journey to that humble house in Spooner's Village, where her maternal lineage was forged. Mammy's mother, Gwendolyn Tyrell, was the first of 7 children born to the family matriarch, Louisa Farrell. She was followed by Rosalie Burroughs Bostick, William Tyrell, Mary Lucinda Burroughs Tyson, known to all as Lucille Tyson or Auntie, Henrietta Constantia Burroughs, Anita Katerina Adela Burroughs, and Marion Farrell Williams. Each of these 7 lives began in the same sacred space, Louisa Farrell's home. Its walls were crafted from the branches of the sugar cane, and its beds were woven from grass. By 1958, while the world outside was rapidly modernizing, this home stood as a testament to a different kind of wealth, one of immaculate care and profound dignity. Despite its earth floor and humble materials, Mammy recalled it being kept spotless, a sanctuary of order and pride where the scent of clean earth mingled with the sweetness of cane. This was a life of profound simplicity, yet it was rich in the things that mattered most. It was a world where a house made of cane could be a palace if it was filled with love, and where a child's future, though uncertain, was cradled in a spotless, sacred simplicity. It was from this foundation of strength and meticulous care that Mammy's own unwavering spirit would eventually emerge. A name is a testament, the bond between sisters. The woman at the heart of a profound legacy, Henrietta Constantia Burroughs, was born in January 1929. To her many adoring nieces and nephews, she was not a distant figure from a family tree, but a beloved Auntie Henny, a name that speaks of warmth and familiarity. An important clue to the past, offered by one of Mammy's cousins, Tovia, suggests a relationship deeper than mere kinship. It is believed that Mammy's mother, Gwendolyn Tyrell, and her sister, Henrietta, were not just siblings, but the closest of confidants, best friends. The evidence lies in a mother's most intimate gift, a name. In a heartfelt tribute, Gwendolyn passed the middle name Constantia to her daughter, bestowing upon Mammy the living legacy of her beloved sister. This was more than tradition. It was a sacred act of bonding. In the close-knit world of their community, where futures were often uncertain, a name carried the weight of eternity. To give a child the name of a sister was to weave an unbreakable thread between them, a declaration that their bond was so essential, so profound, it must be echoed into the next generation. Through the middle name she gifted, Constantia, Auntie Henny achieved a form of earthly permanence. This single name transforms from a simple fact into a profound mystery, a testament to a sisterly love so strong that Mammy herself became its living vessel, ensuring that, even in absence, a presence would forever remain. Though Mammy's middle name forever connected her to Auntie Henny, Mammy's heart had room for all her aunts. Despite being only a few years their junior, peers who might easily have been a sister, she always honored them with the respectful title of Auntie, a testament to the deep reverence woven into their familial bond. As the years passed and the family changed, this bond only deepened. After Auntie Henny's passing in 1986, and with Auntie Rosalie migrating to Barbados, the core of her maternal family in St. Kitts rested with Auntie Marian and Auntie Lucille. For Mammy, they were a living bridge to the mother she never knew, Gwendolyn, and to a world where family was the ultimate sanctuary. Proverbs 31 verses 10 to 11. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. Chapter 2 Uprooted to Nevis. The rhythms of the cane house in Spooner's Village had become the only world Iona knew. The scent of sun-warmed earth, the rustle of her grandmother Louisa's skirt, the watchful, girlish laughter of her young aunts Henrietta, Marian, Lucille, who were more like lively older sisters. They were a tight constellation of women, a buzzing hive of feminine care where she was the cherished center. Here, she was cradled in a world of soft voices and ready hands. But a child sanctuary is a fragile construct. The change arrived with the solid, unfamiliar figure of a man. Her father, Ernest Libbard, crossed the Narrows from Nevis, not for a visit, but with the quiet, irreversible finality of a claim. He had come to collect his daughter. At 1 year and 8 months old, Iona was a silent, watchful child. She had not yet taken her first steps. Words had not yet formed on her lips. In the harsh language of the day, she was a child failing to thrive, her development stalled by the profound, unknowable grief of a motherless infancy. She was a tiny bird, all eyes and fragility, accustomed to the soft nest of women. As she was lifted from Louisa's arms, her dark eyes, too wise for her face, likely took in the final glimpse of the cane house, a humble fortress against the world, now receding. She did not walk to the waiting boat. She was carried because she could not walk. The Kiddishin shoreline, with its rugged green slopes and familiar cadence, softened into a blue haze as the boat pitched on the channel's chop. The salt spray was a new, startling sensation. The groaning of the timbers, the male voices, the vast, terrifying expanse of water. This was her first brutal lesson in the physics of displacement. She was a parcel of quiet sorrow, being delivered into an unknown equation. The Nevis that rose from the sea was a different kind of beauty. Where Street Kitts was bold and dramatic, with a mighty central peak, Nevis was a softer, rounded emerald, its summit perpetually veiled in a halo of cloud. It felt more intimate, yet more isolating. The vibrant, youthful chaos of Spooner's Village, with aunts who were playmates, was replaced by a new, more complex web of kinship. Here, at Morning Star, she was enveloped by her paternal grandmother, Florence Libbard, a woman of deep, steady warmth. And just a short distance away, in brown pasture, was her father, Ernest, now building a new life. It was a constellation of family, but within it, one figure emerged as the unwavering center. That figure was her Aunt Isabel. Isabel was not a peer, but a force. She was a woman of purpose, with hands used to work and a mind sharpened by ambition. She became the primary caregiver, the architect of Iona's recovery. With patient, unwavering dedication, she nurtured the fragile child until, slowly, the first steps came, followed by the first words. Her care was not playful coddling, but the intentional stewardship of a potential she saw glittering beneath the silence. As young Iona grew, her aunt began to instill life lessons by teaching her the simple things of life, how to tend a garden, mend a seam, and measure flour for bread. But soon, she carefully instilled in her a deeper lesson, the sacred importance of education. She saw that Iona possessed a quick mind, interested in learning and grasping new concepts with an ease that delighted her. When Iona was finally old enough, her aunt, firm in her conviction, took the girl to enroll in school without her father's consent. She spoke of school with reverence that others reserved for church, planting the seed of a future in the newly fertile ground of Iona's mind. The tablecloth dress. That seed would soon require a garment to wear. In the face of profound scarcity, Aunt Isabel performed quiet acts of magic. Her love was not measured in shillings and pence, but in ingenuity and care. With no money for fabric, she saw potential where others saw only necessity. In a breathtaking act of devotion, she took the very tablecloth from her dining table, a centerpiece of her humble home, and with skillful hands, transformed it into a school dress for her beloved niece. This single dress became Mammy's uniform, a symbol of both sacrifice and pride. Worn to school each day, its care was a sacred ritual. Under her aunt's guidance, Mammy learned the precise art of laundering it with a cold pot, of boiling starch from the cassava root, and of ironing it to a crisp, fresh perfection. The cost of their materials was a mere shilling and a penny. Still, the value of the lesson, that her education was worth any sacrifice, was immeasurable. Aunt Isabel's creativity knew no bounds. Later on, she would also acquire sturdy flour bags and, through masterful dyeing techniques, conjure them into vibrant, colorful garments. This was more than just making do. It was an act of defiance against circumstance. In her aunt's hands, a bag meant for flour became a canvas for hope, and a tablecloth became a testament to the fact that a child's dreams were more important than any household furnishing. Mammy told me that she loved learning from the very first day she went to school. She would come home each afternoon, her face alight with excitement over a new word or a sums puzzle solved. Despite having only one dress to wear and no shoes on her feet, she relished the thought of going to school each morning. The classroom became her chapel, and each lesson a whispered prayer. It was a love she would one day pass on, so profound that her own children would later call her by the devoted name of Mammy. In the classroom, she absorbed everything with little apparent effort, but with a quiet, remarkable efficiency. Each new fact was a seed that found fertile ground, and she nurtured it into swift and certain understanding. The penny and the principle. Life under her aunt's care was built on simple, profound sacrifices. Each day, Aunt Isabel provided Iona with a single penny for lunch, a coin bearing the face of King George. This small treasure was diligently spent on a loaf of bread and a sugar cake, a humble meal that fueled not just her body, but also her dreams in the classroom. The penny was more than currency. It was a daily reminder that she was worth the investment, that her future mattered enough to give up what little they had. For several years, Iona's home life was stable. She was cocooned in her aunt's nurturing and discipline, a life punctuated by visits to her paternal grandmother's home as well as her father's home. These were years defined by a cherished stability, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had marked her earliest days, and a foundation upon which the rest of her life would be built. Proverbs 22 verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Chapter 3. The Tug of War. For 6 years, the sun-drenched haven of Morning Star, Nevis, had been young Iona's entire world. Under the loving and disciplined wing of her Aunt Isabel, life was a sacred rhythm of growth and learning. Each morning began with purpose. Aunt Isabel ensured Iona was dressed and ready for the journey to school, instilling in her the unshakable value of an education. Each afternoon, she returned to her second classroom, the sprawling garden behind the house. This green space was where Aunt Isabel's own profound lessons took root. Her hands, weathered, skilled, and wise, taught Iona the language of the earth, how to press a seed into the warm soil with hope, to distinguish the eager sprout of a carrot from the stubborn weed, and to listen for the whisper of the rain that would quench their thirst. The garden was a kingdom of abundance, rows of crisp potatoes and carrots buried like treasures, fruit trees offering sweet, sun-warmed mangoes and guavas, and the satisfying crunch of peanut. It was an inheritance of resilience, a quiet power cultivated in the Nevisian soil, balanced perfectly with the intellectual nourishment she received in the classroom. Choice forged in flesh and will. For a few fragile years at Morning Star, under the watchful warmth of her paternal grandmother Florence and the disciplined love of Aunt Isabel, Iona found her footing. School became a sacred word, a promise whispered by her aunt. But a shadow loomed from Brown Pasture, where her father built his new life. When Iona was 6, that shadow solidified into a stark ultimatum. With the birth of his daughter Vanetta, everything changed. Ernest Libbard, now firmly established with his new wife, presented not a request, but a decree. He no longer wanted a visiting daughter. He demanded a live-in caretaker. This hard-won peace was perpetually fragile. The central conflict of Iona's childhood was a relentless undercurrent. Her father remained a persistent force, insisting that her place was in his home, not the schoolhouse. Iona's visits to Brown Pasture now came with a price. Her father would keep her home from school, repurposing her childhood for a weighty duty to babysit her infant sister, Vanetta. Iona, who had just learned to read her own name, was tasked with bathing and minding a baby. She was, as she would later describe with devastating simplicity, a child minding a child. The love in Aunt Isabel's home, a love that fought for her education and her very voice, now existed in direct opposition to the demand from her father's home, a demand that saw her only as a pair of useful hands. 2 households, 2 visions for her life, stood on the same island, separated only by a short walk down a dusty road. The real tug of war was no longer over the sea, but over her soul. And the rope was a 6-year-old girl, just beginning to bloom, caught between 2 irreconcilable pulls. One day, Ernest arrived at Isabel's gate not for a visit, but for a reclamation. His decree was absolute. Iona's place was now in his home, not as a daughter, but as a nursemaid. The confrontation was brutal in its clarity. Ernest did not merely state his claim. He attacked the very foundation of his sister's care. For the past 4.5 years, Iona had lived primarily with Isabel, and he had been perfectly happy with the work she was doing rearing his daughter. He was happy to see that she was able to walk, talk, and do things that he had not taught her to do. She was also helpful with going to fetch water and taking care of the garden at both her aunt's home and her father and grandmother's home. Before he had children with his new wife, he had been satisfied with his sister's care. Now, however, he accused Isabel of overstepping her bounds, framing her obsession with sending Iona to school and preventing her from staying home to babysit her baby sister as interference. In his view, Isabel's devotion had shifted from help to hindrance. Iona was needed at home, and her place, he insisted, was fulfilling her practical duty to the family. The news struck like a physical blow. The vibrant world of Isabel's garden, where Iona learned the names of plants and the sound of her own potential, suddenly bleached of color. The scent of ripening fruit now carried the bitter tang of servitude. Her father's silhouette in the gateway framed not a parent, but a foreman. He had come to draft a child into labor. What followed was not just an argument, but an abduction in slow motion. When Ernest moved to grab his daughter, Isabel immediately intervened. The clash of their wills over Iona's destiny erupted into a horrifying, literal struggle. Each adult gripped one of the little girl's arms and pulled. Iona became the rope in a savage tug of war, her small body stretched between 2 irreconcilable futures. In that instant, she recalled, her voice forever haunted, my arms felt like they were being ripped from my body. The pain was more than physical, it was the tearing of her very soul. On one side, the pull of blood and obligation toward a life of silent duty in a nursery. On the other side, the pull of love and intellect toward the boundless horizon of a classroom. Suspended in that agony, courage beyond her years ignited. Through tears and terror, the 6-year-old girl found her voice. She looked at her father, the source of the pain, and made her choice known. I want to live with Aunt Isabel, she declared. It was a sentence that changed everything. She chose her own mind. She chose school. This victory, however, was not a clean escape. It was a tense, fractured peace. Her father's demand was a debt that could not be fully refused. While she lived with Isabel and began her belated education, her childhood was levied for service. Visits to brown pasture meant being kept home from school, her books exchanged for a baby. By 8, she was minding not just Vanetta, but Emerald and Elvira. By 11, the care of 4 younger children rested on her small shoulders. The tug of war never truly ended. It simply moved from the garden gate to the interior of her life, a constant tension between the future she fought for in the classroom and the past that relentlessly called her to the cradle. Each day was a balancing act on a fraying rope, but she had made her choice. And on the foundation of that painful, defiant stand, a stand taken with an arm nearly pulled from its socket, the woman later affectionately known as Mammy would begin to build her own unshakable legacy. Stitches of imagination. Amid the backdrop of responsibility and silent conflict, Mammy's childhood was not without its own pockets of pure, inventive joy. She often reflected fondly on one of her most cherished escapes, the hours spent crafting doll clothes with her dear friend, a boy named Reginald Allen. In their world, the art of sewing was stripped of traditional tools, but never of imagination. When a precious needle could not be found, their creativity knew no bounds. Mammy recalled with a spark of pride how they would ingeniously use a fish bone, carefully pierced to form an eye, as their needle. They would thread it with colorful strands pulled from old fabrics, transforming a tool of the sea into an instrument of creation. Sewing with fish bone for a needle was more than a game. It was a testament to resourcefulness born of necessity. As their own clothes wore thin, they were not discarded but lovingly repurposed, each scrap of fabric stitched with care into a new gown or shirt for a beloved doll. In January 2025, I had the honor of visiting with one of our oldest relatives, 92-year-old Sylvanie Maynard, whom we called Auntie Vanny in Nevis. She shared a remarkable story that corroborated my mother's account. Auntie Vanny recalled how they would carefully save a fish bone, pierce a hole through it, and use it as a makeshift needle to be threaded and used to sew clothing. In those moments, with the gentle pull of the fish bone needle through cloth, the pressures of her world faded away. The act of creation became a sanctuary, a shared language of laughter and stories between 2 friends, weaving normalcy and joy that would remain one of her most vibrant memories. Unfortunately, Auntie Sylvanie passed away in February 2026, a few months before the publication of this book. Echoes of laughter, shadows of loss. In those rare sun-drenched afternoons, sitting with her friend Reginald, Mammy was cocooned with him in a world of their own making. Mammy recalled they were blissfully free from the complex burdens of the adult world, which so often pulled at her. It was a simple, profound joy. We must have been the only ones around like that, she mused, her voice softening with the memory of an innocence that felt unique and sacred. This cherished circle of friendship held its own characters. Names like Bobsy and Merritt emerged from her memory, each a vibrant thread in the story of her youth. Yet, woven among the bright colors of joy were darker threads of loss. Merritt, who was an integral part of her life, met an untimely demise, a sudden lesson in life's fragility that pierced the bubble of her childhood. These recollections are a mosaic of joy and sorrow, each piece shaping her understanding of love and connection. Through it all, the laughter that echoed in her aunt's home, and the profound loss of a friend, one thing remained unshaken. The essence of those moments spent sewing and creating, the timeless bond forged in simplicity, was permanently etched into her heart. It became a wellspring of strength and a lasting celebration of a childhood in which, against all odds, love found a way to create its own light. A childhood forged in purpose. Mammy told me about how her life was punctuated by other moments of simple, joyful discovery. She fondly recalled playing with matchsticks and matchboxes with her brother Stafford, a testament to the ability to find wonder in the most ordinary of things. She felt that she and her younger siblings got along wonderfully. A sense of boredom was a stranger to her world. Her days were too full of purpose for such a luxury. Indeed, Mammy's early years were a masterclass in resilience, painting a compelling portrait of determination. Her days were a continuous stream of purposeful activity, each task a thread in the fabric of her strong character. While many children her age were at play, She was primarily responsible for caring for her younger siblings. This role demanded patience and a nurturing spirit far beyond her years, qualities she embodied with quiet, effortless grace. Beyond the walls of her home, she mastered the art of survival. The daily trek to gather water was not a mere chore, it was an essential pilgrimage for her family's survival. This journey, repeated with unwavering commitment, taught her profound lessons in resourcefulness and imprinted upon her the irreplaceable value of community and shared labor. These foundations would support her for the rest of her life. The balance of strength and intellect. Mammy's industrious spirit knew no bounds. She could be seen carrying bundles of sugarcane, gracefully balanced on her head, a daily testament to her physical strength and unwavering determination. This demanding labor, far from breaking her, forged within her a profound sense of accomplishment and a quiet, unshakable pride. Yet, even as her body was engaged in the toil of the fields, her mind was reaching for horizons far beyond them. In the precious quiet moments that she carved out for herself, her passion for learning burned brightly. She dedicated herself to reading and writing, her hunger for knowledge a silent rebellion against the limitations of her circumstances. Each word she read, each sentence she wrote, was a deliberate step toward crafting a brighter, more expansive future for herself. Mammy's multifaceted childhood stands as a monument to resilience. She navigated a youth filled with responsibilities that would overwhelm many, yet her journey was never merely about survival. It was a masterful act of thriving in the face of adversity, a demonstration that even the heaviest burdens cannot crush a spirit dedicated to rising. In balancing the weight of the cane on her head with the weight of her dreams in her heart, she carved a path that continues to inspire all who know her story. The service of song. Mammy had a very beautiful voice and loved to sing. She sang daily, and from her earliest days, the rhythm of her life was set not by a clock, but by this sacred score. Long before she could read the words, she knew the hymns by heart. Her weeks flowed from the structured hymns of Sunday school to the soulful, spontaneous worship that echoed through her village. With a heart full of faith and her bare feet pressed against the warm earth, she would walk to the morning service, the dust of the road a humble part of her offering. Yet it was not within the formal chapel walls that her most profound connection to faith was forged. That happened on Sunday afternoons during the simple, essential chore of collecting water. As she made her way up the dusty road, clay container in hand, the air itself would begin to change. It became charged with the powerful, soulful voices of the village elders gathered under the shade of a tree. They called this gathering their service a raw, impromptu testament to a faith so resilient that it needed no steeple. And there, as her vessel filled drop by drop, Mammy would add her own clear, young voice to the weathered harmonies of her community. Together, they sang the profound hymns of their heritage, I Am Satisfied, and other songs that spoke of burdens borne and a sufficient grace. In these moments, the line between the mundane and the miraculous dissolved. The heavy container of water became lighter, its weight replaced by a profound sense of strength. This was where she learned that faith was not just recited but lived, a deep spiritual resilience drawn as surely as water from a well, preparing her for a future where she would need to draw on that strength time and again. The promise and the slippers. In the early years of her life, Mammy went everywhere barefoot. The warm, packed earth of the village paths, the cool, dusty floors of the schoolhouse, these were the surfaces she knew intimately. Shoes were a luxury her world could not yet afford, and the sight of bare feet on the way to school was a common, unremarked upon fact of life. This personal reality was set against a backdrop of sweeping national change. The political commitments articulated by the Honorable Robert Bradshaw, who subsequently became the island's first premier, were expressed in highly personal terms. His pledge was not an abstract policy to her generation. It was a simple, profound vow. Every child would have shoes. For Mammy, That national promise became a tangible hope during a special outing with her Aunt Rosalie. The destination was the legendary Bata store, located in the very heart of Basse-Terre, the bustling capital of St. Kitts. In those days, Basse-Terre was, and remains, the vibrant center of the Twin Islands, where all government buildings stood and the main stores were located. A trip into town was an event, and a visit to Bata was a pilgrimage of particular importance. It was the place where everyone from every village in both Street Kitts and Nevis went to purchase shoes. Stepping inside the Bata shoe store was to enter a world of new possibilities. The store was a hallmark of modernity and access, offering the sturdy, practical footwear that would outfit a nation. While many, including Mammy, had only ever known the freedom and hardship of bare feet, and where the most common footwear was simple slappers, what we now call flip-flops, the acquisition of a real pair of slippers from Bata was a significant rite of passage. There, amid the orderly shelves, she was gifted with a single, precious pair of brown slippers. They were more than just footwear. They were an emblem of dignity earned, a symbol of her aunt's personal care, and a direct, physical link to a national promise being fulfilled, one child at a time. In that simple pair from the iconic Bata store, the hopes of a family and the ambition of a new nation were perfectly aligned. Mammy emphasized how she cherished those slippers that her aunt bought for her. The shoes were not just a simple gift. For years, her world had been measured in miles walked upon unyielding, stony ground. The soles of her feet bore a living map of her labors, a testament to the sharp prick of unseen thorns on the path to the well, the relentless poke of rough gravel under the weight of a water bucket, and the bruised ache of tilling sun-baked soil. Every journey, whether for sustenance or survival, was imprinted directly upon her skin. The brown slippers from the Bata store were, therefore, more than footwear. They were a barrier between her and the earth's harshness, a promise of dignity where before there was only endurance. She wore them until the leather split and the soles parted company with the uppers, not out of mere frugality, but out of profound reverence. This small, humble pair stood as a dual testament to the loving foresight of an aunt who understood a basic need and to the dawning of a new era. This was an epoch where a child's right to protection, from both the stones on the road and the burdens of poverty, was finally recognized as a national promise. It marked her first, tangible steps into a gentler, changing world. Psalm 27 verse 10. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. Chapter 4 War on the Horizon. For the world, it was a war of armies and ideologies, waged across distant continents and oceans. But for Mammy and her community in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Second World War was a visceral, daily reality measured not in headlines, but in the diminishing contents of a larder. The conflict arrived not with the boom of artillery, but with a creeping, insidious silence, the silence of empty harbors where supply ships no longer docked. As German U-boats turned the azure waters of the Caribbean into a hunting ground, severing the vital arteries of trade, the islands were thrown back on their own resources. The familiar staples that filled their plates, the flour for their bread, the cornmeal for their fungi, a special cornmeal dish, vanished one by one. The threat of hunger fell across the sun-drenched islands, a cold reminder that a war being fought thousands of miles away had declared a quiet, devastating war on their home. But amid this global chaos, a quiet, local revolution took root. Mammy recalled how her aunt and their neighbors turned to the land itself for salvation. With determination as their primary tool, they cultivated corn, watching with bated breath as it grew tall and yielded a golden harvest against all odds. This was only the first step in a relentless cycle of survival. The actual test was in the transformation. The corn was dried and roasted to preserve it. And then came the cassava. Mammy, though young, took part in the grueling, essential labor of grating the tough roots to make cassava bread. It was a demanding and time-consuming task, their hands moving tirelessly to turn the earth's yield into sustenance. They would often infuse the bread with coconut, sugar, and nutmeg, a small act of defiance that wove threads of comfort and normalcy into a fabric of hardship. This was more than farming. It was a profound lesson in resilience. While great powers clashed across the ocean, her community demonstrated a different kind of strength, the kind forged in the heat of the sun and the grit of cassava. They were not passive victims of a global war. They were active architects of their own survival, learning to subsist on the fruits of their own land and labor. This unyielding resourcefulness, born from the fires of world conflict, would become a defining trait of Mammy's entire generation. The breadfruit blessing. The rhythm of life in Mammy's community was set to the rustle of sugar cane and the turning of the earth. On designated plots, neighbors honed their agricultural skills, cultivating not just crops, but a shared sense of self-reliance. Their expertise extended to yams and potatoes, and a bountiful harvest was a cause for celebration. Any surplus was never wasted. Excess potatoes, for instance, were judiciously repurposed to nourish the community's livestock, ensuring that every scrap of their labor served a purpose. Yet, the land could be unpredictable. Seasonal crops could fail, and the threat of scarcity was a constant, quiet worry. It was in these lean times that the community turned with profound gratitude to a timeless guardian, the breadfruit tree. This versatile fruit became a life-saving staple, a gift from the land that staved off hunger. Its importance was so deeply felt that it was immortalized in a heartfelt refrain, a blessing sung with genuine reverence. Breadfruit, breadfruit, God bless the man that watered the root. Whether simply boiled or carefully roasted, the breadfruit was more than just food. It was a symbol of divine providence and human resilience. Among Mammy's most cherished memories was the legendary presence of her maternal Aunt Rosalie. Though Aunt Rosalie migrated to Barbados when Mammy was a young lady, she was renowned throughout the Gull Hill Barbadian community, not for wealth or status, but for the magnificent breadfruit tree that grew on her land. It became a destination. Visitors arrived from near and far, not merely asking for, but desiring the cherished staple. With a generous spirit, Aunt Rosalie never simply handed it over. She encouraged each person to pick their own, transforming a simple harvest into a personal connection and a shared blessing. The ritual that followed was one of immediate, joyful necessity. No sooner was the breadfruit harvested than visitors would build small fires right then and there, the air filling with the smoky, delectable aroma of roasting breadfruit. For many Barbadians, this method of preparation was a rare delight, making the experience at Aunt Rosalie's not just a meal, but a cherished event. Mammy's own journey with breadfruit began when she was a little girl who, after school, would make frequent trips to Rawlins to purchase her own. She fondly recounted the perfect companion to the breadfruit, the yam. She described it with a cook's intimacy, noting its coarse head and tender bottom, and how some grew as impressively as a box. This combination of breadfruit and yam was more than sustenance. It was the flavor of her upbringing and the taste of a vibrant past where community was strengthened and memories were made, one shared meal at a time. The earth's bounty. From a young age, Mammy learned that survival was etched into the very landscape. Her childhood involved journeys into the mountains, her small hands digging into the rich soil to unearth wild yams. These hidden tubers were more than just food. They were treasures, vital lifelines that formed the bedrock of her family's diet. This was supplemented by the island's other bounties, plentiful bananas, often boiled and mashed into comfort, and on rare, special occasions, the luxury of fried potatoes or sprat. But this deep reliance on nature was a delicate balance. The earth could be both provider and withholder. During harsh, dry spells, the ground transformed into a heartbreaking graveyard, where potatoes meant for harvest would rot in the unyielding soil, a stark reminder of their vulnerability. Yet, the community met this uncertainty with determined rhythm and ingenuity. From September, Mammy would join others in sowing cotton seeds, using pieces of potato to nourish and encircle them, a clever technique that, by December, yielded a generous harvest. This was more than farming. It was a dialogue with the land, a testament to their resilience. One of the most vivid symbols of this resourcefulness was the arrival of the cows. When the cows passed through the village, The people would gather the dried dung to build a fire. As it smoldered, they would nestle potatoes directly into the embers, using the dung as a natural earthen oven. The result was a baked potato with a uniquely smoky flavor, a humble delicacy created by necessity, and a profound understanding of the natural world. It was a meal that tasted like survival itself. Mammy's childhood was not one of playthings, but of purpose. The rhythm of her days was set by the arduous, intimate labor of the sugar cane fields. While some used donkeys for transport, she carried her share of the harvest, balanced perfectly on her head, a skill learned young. Alongside the cane, she often bore a basket filled with dung. This humble substance symbolized their profound connection to the earth, a cycle of life in which nothing was wasted. The sacred element. In a world where a single match was a precious commodity, the people of Mammy's community mastered a different kind of magic. They learned to coax a flame onto a piece of wood, nurturing it through the night so its life-giving embers would last until dawn. This was not merely a way to cook. It was a profound act of preservation, a flickering symbol of resilience against the encroaching darkness. This ingenuity was a cherished inheritance. Mammy recalled a story passed down about her paternal grandmother in Nevis. In her yard stood a large, steadfast stone. More than a rock, it was the family's hearthstone. This ancient surface served as the focal point for culinary gatherings, where meals were prepared and family stories were exchanged. It was a place where tradition was warmed not just by fire, but by the spirit of generations, a solid anchor in the flow of their lives. This legacy of hard work extended beyond the home. Mammy's reflections on her upbringing are framed by the soot and sweat of a local foundational industry, the burning of coal. She remembered the individuals, their faces etched with effort, who earned their livelihood by this demanding trade. Her paternal grandmother was a pivotal figure in this labor, her form often silhouetted against the fires of the kiln. Meanwhile, Mammy and her aunt contributed by gathering wood, their hands calloused from a task that was less a chore and more a sacred duty. Their contribution echoed through generations of the same unwavering commitment to survival and the unbreakable ties of family. Water, like fire, was both life and threat. During her challenging upbringing, Mammy witnessed moments of pure genius, often from the very parent whose decisions sometimes strained her. She recalls watching her father, Ernest Libbard, as he undertook a monumental task, meticulously digging a deep hole into the resilient, clay-rich earth. This was not a random effort. It was an act of foresight and creation. When the rain came, this simple excavation was transformed. It became a shimmering, clay-lined reservoir, a natural cistern that captured the rainfall and held it against the sun's thirst. For Mammy and their neighbors, this was not merely a water source. It was a lifeline, a communal wellspring in a world where such resources were precious. They all drank from this collected rainwater, drawn from the earth and sky. And in a testament that felt nothing short of miraculous, they were sustained by it, protected from illness as if by a divine hand. This simple hole in the ground stood as a powerful paradox, a testament to her father's complex legacy, demonstrating that even in hardship, he could engineer a blessing that kept his child and an entire family alive. The same element that had once been a source of life and community in her father's clay reservoir would, in a different chapter of her life, become a source of unseen danger. Mammy recounted a profoundly unsettling experience with contaminated water in Virgin Gorda, a stark reminder that survival often meant navigating hidden perils. She shared a troubling incident. After drinking water drawn directly from the kitchen pipe, she was besieged by persistent, distressing skin irritation. The search for the cause led to a grim discovery. A nearby hole, filled with foul, debris-ridden water, was directly linked to her household supply. She had been unknowingly consuming this tainted water, a revelation that explained the immediate and painful physical consequences. A doctor prescribed her the antihistamine, Periton, to soothe the relentless itching. Still, the memory of the ordeal, the violation of trust in something as essential as water, left a deeper, more lingering discomfort. This modern-day struggle with water purity led her to reflection on the harrowing practices of previous generations. She recalled stories of her own grandmother, who, during times of extreme scarcity, had no choice but to drink from a cattle pond teeming with frogs. This generational juxtaposition paints a profound picture of resilience. It underscores the relentless, evolving challenges faced by her community, where one generation survived the visible perils of shared ponds, and a later one confronted the invisible threats lurking within a kitchen pipe. Mammy's stories often led her to reflect on a profound and unsettling paradox in the rural area where her first granddaughter, Varen, lived. There, a single pond, thick with frogs and shared with cattle, served as a stark lifeline for the community. During times of severe water scarcity, this murky source became unavoidable. Mammy recounted how she and others would make the arduous trek to its banks to collect water for one of the most basic of human needs, drinking. What followed was a mystery that defied simple explanation. Despite the clear risks of consuming such contaminated water, the elderly in that community were known for their impressive longevity. This contradiction hung in the air, a question without a clear answer. Some attributed their resilience to a lifetime of traditional diets, constant physical labor, and unbreakable social bonds, a strength of spirit and body that seemed to armor them against the water's hidden dangers. Others pointed to health practices such as regular consumption of natural deworming remedies. And some wondered if each day of survival was merely a postponement of an inevitable health crisis. This experience with water left Mammy, in her reflections, navigating a precarious and deep human balance, a daily reliance on the only resource available, set against the silent, looming fear of its consequences, a testament to a resilience so profound it could seemingly bend the very rules of health and survival. The Green Thumb Legacy. Mammy's stories often return to the near-mythic figure of her grandmother, a woman whose hands seemed to hold a secret pact with the earth. She possessed what could only be called a green thumb, a revered and almost magical ability to coax life from the soil. Her own gardens were not just flourishing, they were legendary, becoming a beacon of hope and knowledge for the entire community. Her reputation was such that neighbors would travel from nearby areas, not just to admire her work, but to personally request her guidance. They sought the wisdom that turned baby coconuts into thriving trees and barren patches into bountiful plots. Mammy recalled the common yet profound sight of helping her grandmother haul heavy water containers over long distances, the lifeblood for her precious plants. This journey was a ritual, and even when water sloshed and spilled onto the dusty path, a small defeat in the face of her monumental effort, her resolve never wavered. This was more than gardening. It was a sacred trust. The grandmother's journeys for water and the community's journeys to her door created a powerful interconnectedness. It illustrated a shared resilience and a deep, abiding commitment to nurturing growth, a testament to a community whose very soul was rooted in the agricultural traditions that sustained them. The sacred knowledge of the earth did not end with her grandmother. It found a new, devoted steward in Mammy herself. She too cultivated the family's legendary green thumb, a living inheritance that transcended the sea. For years, across the rich soils of St. Kitts and Nevis, and even in the distinct terrain of Virgin Gorda, where she frequented in her mid-adult years, Mammy's hands worked the same magic. She nurtured the land, and in return, it gifted her with abundance, enough to share and receive recognition for, proving that the resilient spirit of her grandmother could not only be passed down, but could also take root and flourish in new ground. The whole story of Mammy's own gardens, the challenges, the triumphs, and the profound lessons they held, is a rich harvest we will explore in detail later. For now, it is enough to know that the seed was planted, and it grew magnificently. The Legend of Mimi. Mammy explained that at the very root of her paternal family tree stands a figure of near mythical stature, her father's grandmother, a matriarch known to all only by the endearing name Mimi. Her true name has been lost to time, but her spirit is as vivid as ever, woven into the very fabric of our family's identity. Some affectionately called her Merry Christmas, a name that perfectly captured the boundless warmth and joy she radiated. Mammy was a force of nature, a living testament to resilience. Even at the remarkable age of her 80s, she displayed a vigor that defied time, often seen skillfully catching rainwater and balancing the heavy bucket on her head with effortless grace. In that image, one could sense the weight of the stories she carried, a century of survival, love, and history held perfectly in balance. Her extraordinary journey on this earth spanned a remarkable 104 years, a lifespan that feels like a legend in itself. Mimi's story is a testament to an indomitable will, a reminder that age is no match for a spirit that fully embraces life with passion and grace. Though the details of her life may fade into the whispers of time, the echo of her strength resonates in the hearts of every generation that gathers to share her incredible legacy. Mammy remembered Mimi not as a distant legend, but as a tangible, nurturing presence who dedicated her long life to raising generations of children and grandchildren. Her love was expressed in profound, simple acts. One of Mammy's most cherished memories was the day Mimi gifted her with a fowl, a gesture of immense generosity and care that she held close to her heart. Yet, this fond memory is tinged with the unpredictability of life. In a sudden, tragic accident, the heavy outdoor kitchen door on the property fell, crushing and killing the very fowl Mimi had given her. The loss was a minor, sharp heartbreak, a reminder of how quickly comfort can turn to sorrow. This kitchen stood on land that had been in the family for generations, owned by Mimi's own grandmother. It was a place steeped in history, yet its fate, like the fowl's, was ultimately beyond Mammy's control. She would later learn that her father had sold this ancestral plot for a modest sum. The memory of the gifted fowl, its accidental death, and the eventual sale of the land are forever intertwined, a bittersweet illustration of how family, legacy, and the passage of time are connected through joy, loss, and the decisions that shape a family story. Two grandmothers, one heart. Although Nevis had become her home, the pull of St. Kitts and the woman who represented her earliest memories remained strong. Mammy fondly recalled the few times she journeyed back across the channel, accompanied by her paternal grandmother, Florence Libbard. These were not mere visits, they were pilgrimages to the roots of her identity, to the sugarcane house in Spooner's Village, and the enduring presence of her maternal grandmother, Louisa Farrell. Louisa stood as a figure of profound resilience, a matriarch whose strength was as sturdy as the walls of her unique home. With vivid detail, Mammy often reflected on her maternal grandmother Louisa's modest dwelling with its well-tended dirt floor. Mammy told me about the rhythms of life there, the dedication to cleanliness, with water sprinkled and the earth swept until it was pristine. She spoke of a time when childhood was intertwined with the very soil, and of the natural wisdom that flourished within those cane walls. Parents, ever watchful, prepared remedies like garlic and wormgrass, especially during mango season, to guard their children's health, a practice as routine as it was vital. These trips were a delicate balancing act of family ties. While Mammy reconnected with her maternal aunts and the formidable Louisa, her traveling companion, her paternal grandmother, would find her own solace. She would stay overnight with a cherished family member named Roach, an arrangement that wove the extended family even closer. This intricate network of care and companionship, spanning 2 islands, reveals a rich tapestry of love and unity. It was a world built on unspoken traditions, where every journey strengthened the bonds that held them all together, creating a legacy that would long outlast the cane walls that started it all. The strength forged in sorrow. Even in the warm embrace of her extended family, life was not without its profound lessons in loss. Mammy would speak, her voice tinged with a lasting sadness, of the shadow that fell over the household with the untimely passing of her aunt, Dita, known formally as Anita Katerina Adela Burrows, another beloved daughter of the resilient Louisa Farrell. This early brush with grief left an indelible mark of sorrow. This quiet ache taught young Iona about the fragility of life long before she should have had to learn it. Yet, it was from this very soil of adversity that her own remarkable strength began to root and grow. The hardships she witnessed and endured did not break her. Instead, they forged a resilience that would become her defining characteristic. This strength, honed in the shadow of loss, prepared her for the profound role she was destined to play. She would carry this fortitude forward, emerging as the very cornerstone of a new generation. Mammy's journey led her to become a mother, nurturing a family of 7, Beverly, Grace, Sheila, Samuel, Deborah, and the twins, Dwight and Dion. Her story is more than a memory. It is a testament to the enduring human spirit, a reminder of the quiet battles fought and the powerful bonds of family that helped a woman not just survive, but build a legacy that would transcend the trials of her time. Psalm 104, verses 14 to 15. He causeth the grass to grow for the cattle, and herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth, and wine that mocketh glad the heart of man, and oil to make his face to shine, and bread which strengtheneth man's heart. Chapter 5, Paternal Family. The Key in the Lock. To write the story of a woman, one must first understand the world that forged her. My mother's story, a tapestry of resilience and grace, has always been the central text of my life. Yet, as I wove its chapters, I found myself confronted by 2 profound silences. The first was a grave, the final resting place of my maternal grandmother, a woman whose name I know, but whose essence is a mystery lost to time. The knowledge of her is buried, not only in the earth, but in the hearts of her sisters, my great-aunts, whom I cherished, but failed to question. In my youth, I mistook their bond with my mother for sisterhood, and by the time I learned the truth, that they were the keepers of my grandmother's memory, I was too timid to ask. While growing up, I had been chastised too often for asking too many questions, and so I remained silent, fearing to open old wounds. That silence now echoes. They have taken their sister's story with them. That first silence, however, ignited a defiant fire within me. I have since granted myself a new and urgent permission to ask the questions that burn in my heart, to pursue the truths that shape us, without fear of reproach. Knowledge is power, and understanding our history is the only way to break its cycles. While the door to my maternal grandmother's story has been sealed by time, this resolve led me to a second, more complex silence, the enigmatic figure of my maternal grandfather, Ernest Libbard. If my maternal grandmother is a faded photograph, my maternal grandfather was a locked door. I knew him only as a fleeting presence, a kind grandfather whom I sent radio dedications or song requests on Radio Paradise, declaring him the best grandfather in the whole wide world. He responded by sending me $5 checks every Christmas. He was also a man of puzzling sternness. He was half of my mother's origin, the architect of the environment in which her fierce spirit was tempered. How could I claim to understand the daughter without first comprehending the father? How could I tell her story of triumph without investigating the contested legacy she triumphed over? This, then, is the necessary, unexpected chapter in my mother's book. It is an investigation into the man who gave her half of her genes, the patriarch whose own hands built the walls her resilience would eventually scale. This is the story of my quest to find Ernest Libbard, not to Leonize or vilify him, but to find the key to the locked door of the past, and in doing so, to finally understand the magnificent strength of the woman who walked through it, my mother, Iona Constantia Tyrell Libbard Barrett. The contested legacy of Ernest Libbard. My grandfather, Ernest Libbard, was a figure who lived just outside the edges of my own life. He was born in Nevis and later built a new life in St. Thomas. I, growing up in St. Kitts, met him only twice. Those 2 visits, however, left an indelible mark. I felt the genuine warmth of his care. Yet, woven into this tapestry of affection were threads of confusion. I remember opening my hand to receive a gift from him, only to be sent away to wash. Repeatedly, I went, scrubbing until my skin felt raw. Eventually, he finally understood the truth. The palms of my hands were not dirty, but simply darker than the rest of my family's. It was a trait I inherited from my biological father. In his strictness, I felt the sting of a shame I did not understand. Another time, he scolded me for reading Sweet Dreams, a harmless teenage romance. My solution was a child's clever subterfuge, hiding the book inside a school textbook. He was a puzzle, a man of affection who also enforced a rigid, often inscrutable, code of conduct. The memory of my grandfather's face lighting up at the sight of me with an open textbook in my hands has always stayed with me, a quiet but unmistakable sign of his approval. That moment spoke of a deep, genuine interest in my education, a sentiment that stands in contrast to what my mother endured in her childhood. For her, his insistence had been different. He saw her not as a student, but as a caretaker, prioritizing her role at home over her place in a classroom. Yet time, perhaps, softened old perspectives. It is possible that as he grew older and welcomed grandchildren, his understanding of what a child could become began to shift. Where he once saw duty, he may have later seen potential. While I can never fully reconcile the two versions of the man, the one who limited my mother's future and the one who smiled at mine, I hold firmly to the truth of that later moment. In his eyes, as he watched me read, I believe there was more than pride. There was a quiet, hard-won recognition that education was not a privilege to withhold, but a gift to pass on. It was this puzzle that, decades later, compelled me to seek out the whole story. The chapters of my mother's life with him were already written in our family lore, a narrative of a tug-of-war over her education. But I needed to understand the man behind the grandfather. What I learned from my aunt and uncle did not simply add to his story, it fundamentally recast the man I thought I knew, corroborating my mother's struggles and revealing the brutal architecture of his parenting. The first and most devastating lesson was that his authority was absolute and his methods could be silently devastating. My aunt recounted to me not one, but two abandonments. The first happened when she was not yet 15. He pulled her from school and sent her from Nevis to St. Kitts to work a full-time job for a pittance, sacrificing her education. The second was the story of the bolted door. As a young woman, she was left on a porch, her bags packed for a promised future, staring at a locked entrance. He was gone without a word. This silent, brutal severance was a lesson in his operational code. His word was final, and his rejection was often delivered without explanation. My mother's fight to stay in school was not an isolated battle. It was part of a systemic pattern of control where his daughter's potential was secondary to their immediate utility. The second lesson, learned from my uncle, was that this control was enforced by fear, but it had a breaking point. Where my aunt's story was one of silent severance, my uncle's was one of explosive confrontation. He described a childhood ruled by a slavery mentality, where an electric cord or a thrown stone was a common punishment. The tension broke when my uncle, as a teenager, stood his ground. After his father threw a stone at him, he threw it back. He learned not to shout when it comes to me, he said, describing a hard one, fragile peace built on resisted authority. This revealed that the strict man my mother described was, in truth, a patriarch whose rule was maintained through intimidation, but one who could be forced to respect a will as strong as his own. Another, and most complex, lesson was that Ernest Libbard was a man of profound contradiction. My aunt once recounted a period in her childhood when she was afflicted by seizures, a frightening and uncertain time. What stayed with her most vividly was not the fear, but the memory of her father's response. He crafted a mixture for her, a remedy born of his own intuition and understanding, unconventional by any standard medical practice. Yet, remarkably, it worked. This act revealed a deeper dimension of his care, a determined, hands-on commitment to her well-being, and a quiet repository of knowledge for treating ailments that fell outside the realm of common medicine. It was a testament that his concern for his children's health could express itself in ways as unique and resourceful as the man himself. My aunt spoke of his strong principles, a phrase that seemed to clash violently with his actions. My uncle helped reconcile this, explaining that his father was a product of his own trauma, operating on a lack of knowledge and a generational slavery mentality. This was the man who could lock a daughter out, yet was also the ingenious provider who bought land, planted gardens, built cisterns, and, unlike so many men of his time, migrated his entire family to St. Thomas and remained faithful to his wife. He was the traditional healer who cured my aunt's seizures. Yet, he created a home so focused on survival that emotional safety was a forgotten luxury. In the end, the conversations with my aunt and uncle did not present a monster, but a man. A complicated, flawed, and driven man whose own harsh upbringing shaped his brutal methods. They corroborated my mother's story in its entirety, revealing that her tug of war was one front in a larger war for autonomy waged by all her children. My personal memories now exist in this stark new light. The man who scolded me for my book was the same one who denied his daughters an education. The man who mistook my pigmentation for dirt was the one who ruled his home with a harsh, unyielding hand. And the man who had to have his loving letters written for him was the same complex soul who believed he was building a fortress for his family, even if he ended up building walls between their hearts. By seeking to understand the grandfather who sent $5 checks, I have come to understand the patriarch who locked the door. And in understanding him, I have found the key to the magnificent, formidable strength he inadvertently forged in his children. My true inheritance is not his story of control, but their profound, hard-won legacy of resilience. The inheritance of the soil. There is one final, living thread that connects us to my grandfather, Ernest Libbard. This legacy has taken root not in trauma, but in the earth itself. It is a truth that emerged not from a story of conflict, but from a simple observation. Nearly all of his children, and I, his grandchild, share a profound and abiding love for gardening. My uncle, in his reflective way, gave this connection its most interesting name. When I asked if he had learned the skill from his father, he corrected me thoughtfully. I wouldn't say I learned it from him, he said. It's more like I inherited it from him. That distinction hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Learning is a conscious transfer of knowledge. Inheritance is something that passes into your very being, a seed planted in your bloodline that is destined to grow. He described seeing his father's love for plants, but not receiving formal lessons on the why or how. It was an absorbed passion, not a taught skill. This resonated deeply with me, and it perfectly described my dear mother. Her garden was not merely a hobby, it was an extension of her life, a daily ritual of love and cultivation. She tended to her flower gardens with an artist's eye, creating bursts of color and fragrance. At the same time, her vegetable patches were planted with the practical wisdom of a provider, ensuring her family was fed from the land. For her, gardening was a quiet act of creating beauty and sustenance in a world that had often offered her struggle. In this shared love, we find a strange and beautiful reconciliation. The man who could be so harsh with his children was also a man who understood the silent, patient language of the earth. He knew which plants could heal, which crops could sustain a family, and that the best time to plant a tree was just before the rains came. This wisdom, this connection to the land, was his true, untainted gift. The slavery mentality that dictated his parenting could not corrupt the simple, generative act of planting a seed. And so, in our respective plots of land, in my mother's vibrant street kit's garden, in my uncle's steadfast plots, and in my own garden in Oklahoma, we each till the soil he loved. We are tending a legacy he never knew he was sowing. The contested patriarch is gone, but the quiet cultivator lives on in our hands. We did not inherit his anger, his harshness, or his limitations, but we inherited his love for the earth. And in that, we have found a way to cultivate peace, harvesting a connection to him that is, finally and simply, about growth. The Voyages of Florence Libbard. The nurturing spirit that defined Mammy did not appear in a vacuum. It was an inheritance passed down through a lineage of remarkable women. Through the stories whispered across generations, the essence of Florence Libbard, Mammy's paternal grandmother, continues to resonate, a testament to the power of family ties and the rich history that forges our identity. According to Mammy, her paternal story began in the serene landscapes of Nevis, where the roots of the Libbard family run deep, anchored by the matriarch, Florence Libbard. From this foundation, Florence emerged as the cornerstone of her family, a woman who devoted her life to the well-being of her 3 children, her firstborn, Ernest Libbard, Mammy's father, followed by the spirited Isabel Libbard, who mostly raised Mammy, and Benson Manuel Libbard. Together, this trio navigated the joys and challenges of life on the vibrant island, their identities shaped by the strong bonds of kinship and tradition. Born into this lineage of resilience, Florence became a nurturer of generations, tending not only to her own children, but also to her grandchildren, including Mammy and her 10 younger siblings. Her home was a cradle of care, a living bridge between the past and the future. Mammy often spoke of the rhythm of her childhood in Nevis, a rhythm set not by a clock, but by the tide and her grandmother's formidable will. Florence Libbard was a woman of commerce, her spirit as vast as the sea she routinely conquered. Her business was known by a simple, powerful term, turn hand. She was a trader in the truest sense. Each week, she would gather a cargo of provisions, some harvested from her own fertile garden, others carefully purchased from fellow growers across Nevis. This bounty was her inventory. Then, with the shrewd eye of a merchant, she would transport it all across the Narrows to the larger markets of St. Kitts, where she would sell it for a profit. It was a cycle of savvy and stamina, transforming the yield of one island into the currency of another. Mammy told me that sometimes she was invited along on these expeditions. The journey itself was an adventure fraught with nature's whim. They would board the traditional wooden sailing boat, the journey's length a direct negotiation with the wind. A strong, steady breeze was a blessing, pushing them briskly toward the green hills of St. Kitts. But if the air grew still and quiet, the sea would become a glassy plain. The sails would hang limp, and the boat would drift gently, making little headway. On those days, Mammy recalled, the short crossing could stretch into a seemingly endless voyage, lasting from dawn until dusk. She would spend the day on the water, watching her grandmother's patient, resolute profile against the horizon, learning a silent lesson in perseverance that no classroom could ever provide. When the demands of trade required an overnight stay in St. Kitts, Mammy's grandmother would weave a beautiful tapestry of family connection. Florence Libbard, the enterprising Nevisian matriarch, would sometimes bring young Mammy to the very heart of her origins, the Canaan husk home of her maternal grandmother, Louisa Farrell, in Spooner's Village, Caen. This humble dwelling was a sacred site, the cradle of their lineage. Here, within walls crafted from sugar cane and upon its well-kept earth floor, Louisa had given birth to all her children. And here, they would gently remind Mammy she too had drawn her first breath. These visits were a grounding ritual, a physical return to the soil from which her story sprang. As Mammy was enveloped in the warmth and stories of her maternal kin, her paternal grandmother would retire for the night to the home of another relative, a family known affectionately as Roach. This seamless arrangement revealed a deep, interconnected web of kinship. It showed that Mammy's world, though shaped by the sea between islands, was held together by an unbroken net of family, ensuring she was always home, no matter which shore she found herself upon. The quest for a brighter future. My grandfather, Ernest Libbard, was a man of Nevisian soil, yet his vision stretched far beyond its shores. A determined traveler, he journeyed across the Caribbean, driven by a singular goal, to secure better opportunities for his family. His quest eventually led him to settle in the U.S. Virgin Islands, planting a flag of hope in a new land. By 1967, this hope had catalyzed a major family movement, as the majority of his children embarked on their own journeys, migrating to the U.S. or the British Virgin Islands. Just 2 years later, in 1969, Florence Libbard passed away. At the time, Mammy resided in St. Kitts, separated from her beloved grandmother by the sea. Though divided by miles at her passing, they remained united in spirit. The loss of Florence marked the end of a profound chapter. Yet her legacy of strength and unconditional love became an unshakable pillar in the family story. This era of migration was defined by formidable bureaucratic hurdles. According to Mammy, obtaining a visa was a protracted and arduous process, forcing families into a complex, cyclical dance between islands. The precious permits for the U.S. Virgin Islands granted only fleeting stays, weeks or months at most. As their legal time dwindled, many faced a difficult choice. Their solution was one of profound resourcefulness. They would voyage to Tortola in the British Virgin Islands. In this temporary refuge, they would wait, biding their time before attempting to return to the U.S. islands to plead for more time. This was not a straightforward journey, but a relentless tide of coming and going, a strategy born of necessity. The story of my grandfather, Ernest Libbard, and his family is a powerful capsule of a broader Caribbean narrative, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of those who navigated the labyrinth of immigration policies. Theirs was a journey marked by relentless determination, a continuous pursuit of stability and growth against all odds. Mammy's choice, an anchor of love. A crossroads arrived in Mammy's life, presenting a heart-wrenching decision that would forever define her family's future. As a devoted single mother to her two young daughters, Beverly and Grace, she was presented with a compelling opportunity to journey overseas with her siblings in pursuit of new beginnings. Yet, the very thought of being separated from her children by such a vast distance was an unbearable weight upon her heart. Trips. The exhausting cycle of shuttling between St. Thomas and Tortola during brief visitation periods had already taken its toll, each departure deepening the ache of separation from her daughters. Yet, in a cruel twist of timing, she discovered she was pregnant with her third child almost immediately after securing a promising job overseas. Standing at this precipice, Mammy made an anguished choice. She turned away from the overseas opportunity and returned to the familiar soil of St. Kitts and Nevis, resolved to build a stable life where she could both provide for and personally nurture her children. She confided in me that the news of her pregnancy with me filled her with overwhelming disappointment and fear. In a moment of sheer desperation, she explained that she climbed a breadfruit tree and leapt from its branches, hoping the fall would end the pregnancy. It did not. That act of despair, however, became a turning point she would later regard with profound gratitude. Mammy often confessed that she was thankful she did not know how to end a pregnancy, for the child she had hoped to lose, the daughter she named Sheila, would grow to become a deep and abiding source of joy in her life. What began as a crisis of hope became, in time, a testament to it. She nurtured her third child with a determination forged in that struggle, and in the name Sheila, she planted a declaration of the future she was now more committed than ever to cultivate. Mammy's story stands as a powerful testament to the sacrifices woven into the fabric of motherhood. She consciously chose love over opportunity and the presence of her family over the promise of distant shores. In pivoting her entire life to encircle her children, she did not just accept her role, she sanctified it, laying an unshakable foundation for a legacy defined by purpose and unwavering dedication. Threads across the sea. In an era defined by separation, the story of Mammy's paternal family became a powerful testament to the resilience of kinship. As her siblings settled across the seas, Mammy fought the tide of distance with the most powerful tool she had, her pen. A heartfelt and constant exchange of letters, particularly with her sisters Pansy and Vanetta, and her father, became a sacred ritual. These carefully penned words, traveling across oceans, were more than just news. They were lifelines of love, reminders that their bond could transcend any map. While letters formed the emotional backbone of their connection, her family's commitment ran even deeper. Two of her older sisters, Vanetta and Elvira, frequently made the journeys back to St. Kitts. Their visits were a tangible affirmation that blood ties could defy geography. But it was her youngest brother, Densmore, who emerged as the family's steadfast archivist of the heart. His consistent, dedicated efforts to communicate became a vital anchor for Mammy and her children, ensuring the threads to their extended family never frayed. Adding another layer to this narrative, Mammy's father, Ernest Libbard, wove his own threads of connection from across the sea. His regular letters were a steady source of encouragement, but it was the yearly parcels that made his love tangible. These carefully packed boxes, often containing clothing that Mammy's siblings had outgrown, became treasured artifacts of home. For Mammy's children, however, the real prizes were the foods we could enjoy: 5 pounds of Uncle Ben's rice, 5 pounds of cornmeal, and 5 pounds of pure white sugar. We waited for their arrival with anticipation that lasted for months. The sacred responsibility of retrieving these precious packages fell to me, Sheila. This was no simple errand. It was a bureaucratic pilgrimage that felt like a dizzying merry-go-round. First, I would join the long, slow-moving lines at the customs office on the bayfront. Then I walked to the deep-water seaport, my small frame dwarfed by the imposing government buildings, to have one form stamped. But that was only the beginning. I would then walk a considerable distance to another office at the sprawling seaport complex to secure a second signature, and then to a third for an inspection. A series of unsmiling officials were involved, each inspecting, signing, and questioning before I was finally permitted to pay the customs duty. Only then, after hours of this exhausting circuit, could I finally claim the precious box. But the journey was not over. Because Mammy worked long hours and could not take time away, the final challenge remained. I had to seek out and negotiate for transportation, carefully balancing the heavy parcel on the journey home. My determination to complete this arduous process was fueled by the weight of my family's hopes. Success meant more than securing sugar and rice. It was about upholding a vital transoceanic bond. The profound significance of this carefully nurtured network was most beautifully realized when 4 of Mammy's own children embarked on a journey to the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. These were not mere vacations, they were pilgrimages of connection, a new generation actively strengthening the bonds their mother had so tenderly preserved. In this legacy, the letters and visits were revealed as more than simple gestures. They were the essential, life-giving components of a support system woven with love. Proverbs 20 verse 7. The just man walketh in his integrity. His children are blessed after him. Chapter 6, An Unstable Horizon. The Inherited Burden. Mammy remembered her father, Ernest Libbard, possessed by a singular purpose, to build a home for his family. His goal was not only to build his home in Nevis, but also to build one in St. Thomas. He worked with a relentless, almost feverish energy on his house, a testament to his dedication and his dreams. Yet, beneath the steady rhythm of his hammer, another, more dangerous pulse was quickening, one that would go unheard until it was too late. For years, Ernest Libbard had labored under the silent, relentless grip of hypertension. This was not a battle he faced alone. It was a haunting family legacy. On his side of the family, the specters of high blood pressure loomed large, silent passengers in the bloodline. Mammy would often reflect on this paradox, noting that her own formidable great-grandmother, who lived to be 104, had also wrestled with the same challenges. It was a genetic inheritance as specific as the color of his eyes, a burden compounded by the weight of expectation and the physical toll of a lifetime of relentless labor. Despite the silent history of illness that ran through his lineage, Ernest Libbard rarely, if ever, paused. He was a man sculpted by the unyielding ethos of hard work. My mother believed that this virtue ultimately cast a long shadow over the necessity of self-preservation. The fact that his own grandmother, who carried the same burden of high blood pressure, lived to the extraordinary age of 104 adds a layer of irony to his story. It forces a haunting, unanswerable question. Could a different choice, a moment of rest, have broken the cycle that seemed so deeply woven into his fate? Reflecting on his journey reveals that high blood pressure is far more than a medical condition. It is a silent war waged in the private spaces between heartbeats, a battle against inherited expectations as much as against genetics. In his final drive to create a legacy, he was unknowingly racing against the very clock his own body kept. The call from Nevis. The news arrived not as a shock, but as a deeply felt tremor. the culmination of a worry that had shadowed Mammy for years. She received the heart-wrenching call that her father had passed away. She believed that his life ultimately claimed by the relentless complications of chronic high blood pressure. He had lived with the condition for years, a silent companion to his labors, yet he never allowed it to dictate his pace. Even in the final months of his life, his relentless spirit was visible in the unfinished walls of his house in Nevis, a project he pursued with determination that, in the end, might have cost him everything. His passing carved a profound void, a stark testament to a spirit that was both fiercely determined and heartbreakingly fragile. This was not an isolated tragedy, but part of a troubling family legacy. Mammy reflected on the complex inheritance passed down from her father's side, a history where the chronic condition of hypertension was as much a part of the lineage as any family trait. Her father's passing forced Mammy to confront this inherited burden, transforming her grief into a solemn vow. It became a mission to honor his unwavering determination by championing the cause she felt he overlooked, the critical importance of self-care, and the profound strength it takes to truly rest. In this shared legacy of resilience and vulnerability, we must learn the lesson his life imparts, that true strength is not always found in relentless labor, but sometimes in the courage to rest. For his sake, and for all who fight similar quiet battles, we must learn to listen to the rhythm of our own bodies, to value self-care as an act of preservation, and to find the profound power in simply slowing down. The legacy in her veins. The family legacy that Mammy had so keenly observed in her father eventually became her own to bear. In time, after her last pregnancy, she also developed high blood pressure, a quiet inheritance that she managed with resilience for many years. While she was blessed to live a much longer life than her father, the relentless strain of the condition is believed to have ultimately contributed to her passing. In her final years, the true weight of this inherited burden became heartbreakingly clear. The relentless presence of high blood pressure likely contributed to a series of minor strokes. These events, subtle yet cumulative, began to steal from her the very things that defined her joy, the ability to tend a garden, to move freely, to engage in the vibrant life she had always known. This gradual narrowing of her world was perhaps the most challenging chapter, a quiet battle against a condition that sought not just to shorten a life, but to dim its light, piece by piece. Her journey stands as a chapter in this family narrative, a powerful testament to the enduring strength she possessed, and a solemn reminder of the silent, generational challenge she both witnessed and lived. Mammy's story, from the daughter who fought for her education to the matriarch who nurtured her own family, was marked by resilience at every turn. Yet even she could not fully escape the inheritance written in her blood. Her life, like her father's, imparts a lesson, that the courage to rest is as vital as the strength to labor, and that true legacy is measured not only in what we build, but in how we care for the vessels that carry us through the world. Psalm 90 verse 10. The days of our years are 80 years and 10, and if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is there strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. Chapter 7 Maternal History. The Mystery of Gwendolyn Tyrell. In the tapestry of our family's past, specific threads are vivid and intense. In contrast, others are tragically frayed, leaving gaps that ache with unanswered questions. One such thread is the name Gwendolyn Tyrell, my mother's mother. This was not just a name passed down, it was a vessel for a legacy steeped in sorrow, superstition, and local folklore. As I mentioned in the earlier chapter, my mother, Iona, whom I affectionately call Mammy, was born in 1938. Her own mother, Gwendolyn, was a mere 19 years old when she gave birth to Mammy, but her life was cut short just as it began. The absence she left was not merely emotional, it was starkly physical. Not even my grandmother had a picture of her, Mammy would mutter, her voice tinged with the old, familiar sorrow. I would cry when I heard other children talk about their mothers, she painfully recalled, the memory catching in her throat. For a child, this was a profound void, a longing for a face, a story, a connection to the woman who gave her life, leaving behind only a name and the echo of a presence. To fill the silence, Mammy turned to her maternal grandmother, Louisa Farrell, who held the fragile remnants of Gwendolyn's story. These were not simple tales of remembrance. They were fragments of history intricately woven with the dark threads of folklore and caution. It was from her that Mammy first learned the name Gwendolyn Tyrell, and it was from her that she learned of the shadow that hung over their community, a deep and pervasive belief in obeah. Her grandmother's voice would lower, as if the very walls might listen. She spoke of an old woman, a practitioner of these arts, and of a community where envy festered into something far more dangerous. In those days, the grandmother whispered, if you were blessed with beauty, if you possessed long, flowing hair, they would do something to you. It was a belief system that carried an ominous threat. Curses were not mere stories. They were weapons aimed at those who shone too brightly. The tragic, early death of a beautiful young mother was no longer just a family tragedy. It was the beginning of a more profound mystery, one that lay shrouded in the whispers of the past. The warnings from Mammy's grandmother were not abstract. They were chillingly real, illustrated by the fate of others in the community. She spoke of Mr. B's sister, Inez, in Nevis, who became a victim of these very fears. The story was a grim cautionary tale. After a seemingly innocent act, having her hair combed by another, Inez's lush hair was said to have fallen out completely, vanishing from her scalp as if by some dark magic. This was the tangible power of envy that festered in the shadows. I carried this story for years, a dark heirloom. Later, I would speak with others from that community, elders whose memories were long. I asked if they had ever heard of Inez, of the hair lost to a jealous comb. The confirmation came from the elders. One person gave a nod, a knowing look, a related fragment recalled. One woman spoke of a cousin who suffered a similar, unexplained loss. Another remembered a proverb about the evil hand that could steal beauty. Inez's specific tragedy may have blurred at the edges, but the core truth remained vividly intact in our shared memory. The story was believed to be real. The fear was real. The warning, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, was anchored in a past they all knew to be true. Yet, amidst these stories of fear, Mammy clung to a firmer, brighter truth. She held an unshakable belief that God's power far surpassed any dark arts. If you believe in God, she would assert, God has more power. This faith became her shield, a source of strength that would later be tested most profoundly. For years, the death of her mother, Gwendolyn, was a silent, aching mystery, a loss shrouded in whispers of jealousy. This narrative was more than a family story. It was a reflection on grief, identity, and the fragile, complex bonds that hold a community together. The legacy of Gwendolyn Tyrell was not one of sorrow alone, but of an enduring, lifelong search for understanding. Then, decades later, the silence was shattered. The setting was a local hospital. An unassuming woman, on her deathbed, in a room heavy with mortality, unburdened a conscience she could no longer carry. With a voice weakened by time and regret, she confessed to being responsible for the circumstances that led to my maternal grandmother Gwendolyn's death. This was a plea for forgiveness, finally giving voice to the jealousy that festered for a lifetime and had stolen a mother from her child. This confession did not bring the dead back to life, but it irrevocably altered the landscape of the past. It laid bare the devastating consequences of envy and transformed a lifelong mystery into a painful human truth. For Mammy, it was the final, heartbreaking piece of a puzzle she had spent her whole life trying to solve. This was a stark reminder that some ghosts are not spirits, but the unresolved regrets of the living, and that the path to peace often winds through the rugged terrain of forgiveness. Me ain't got no mother. Of all the legacies Mammy carried, the most haunting was not a tangible heirloom, but an absence, the love of a mother she never knew. This was a legacy of loss she feared might echo through the generations, an inheritance of sorrow passed down in silence. That fear crystallized into a heartbreaking reality in August of 1991, when history cruelly repeated itself. Mammy's own beloved second daughter, Grace, tragically died during a cesarean section. Grace was 2 weeks overdue. Her trusted doctor had gone on vacation, leaving her in the care of another who may not have known her history. In a single, devastating moment, Mammy's second daughter was gone, and a granddaughter was left motherless. Determined to break the cycle of that aching void, Mammy stepped immediately into the breach. She knew the profound loneliness of a childhood without a mother's embrace, and she was resolved that her granddaughter would not feel that same hollow want. When Grace's daughter was discharged from the incubator, Mammy took her home, nursing her to health with a devotion that was both a salve for the infant and a balm for her own grief. She poured into her motherless granddaughter the security, the explicit love, and the unwavering presence she herself had yearned for, building a fortress of care to keep the legacy of loss at bay. It was therefore a profound and chilling shock when, years later, she overheard her tender-aged granddaughter voice the very lament that had haunted her own soul. The child's tearful cry, "Me ain't got no mother," was a direct echo from the past, a stark revelation that despite all her love and fierce protection, the ache of maternal absence had reverberated, unchanged, into a new generation. In that moment, the pain she had tried so hard to banish whispered back, revealing that some sorrows are so deep they can be inherited in a single, heartbreaking sentence. Yet, within this echo lay a profound difference and the seed of hope. While Mammy's childhood was defined by the harsh void of being motherless, she had poured an abundance of love and support into her motherless granddaughter's life. Fortunately, this grandchild had not just endured, she had thrived. Excelling academically, she earned a scholarship to study in England, her father's homeland, building a future from the very foundations of her loss. Witnessing this cycle of pain and resilience solidified Mammy's lifelong determination. She made a vow that would become her answer to the grief that had plagued 2 generations. When Mammy had children, she silently declared every single one would receive an education. No daughter would ever be kept at home to look after a baby. No child's potential would be sacrificed. In that moment, Mammy was no longer just a victim of her past. She became the architect of her family's future, determined to replace the legacy of loss with a new inheritance, one of opportunity, empowerment, and unbreakable love. Matthew 11 verses 28 to 29. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. Chapter 8, The Borrowed Child. A mother's sacrifice. Mammy trusted me with the stories of her life, stories that were often layered with quiet pain. She confided in me about the birth of her first child, a time that should have been filled with joy but was instead shadowed by a deep, consuming sadness. What we now understand as postpartum depression had descended upon her, a heavy fog that made it impossible for her to care for her newborn daughter, Beverly. In an act of necessary mercy, her Aunt Isabel stepped in, taking the baby to care for her during those first, fragile months. This act of kindness, however, slowly twisted into something else. As Mammy recovered her strength and spirit, her aunt refused to relinquish the child. Isabel had grown possessive, asserting that the baby was now her own, having cared for her from birth. The stage was set for an impossible choice. A year later, when Mammy made the courageous decision to leave Nevis for St. Kitts to seek employment and build a future, her aunt delivered an ultimatum. She informed my Mammy that she would not be taking Beverly with her. Mammy could leave, but her firstborn daughter would remain behind. For the sake of peace and perhaps haunted by the stigma of her past struggle, Mammy made a heart-wrenching sacrifice. She left her firstborn in the care of Aunt Isabel, a decision that would echo for decades. The injustice was compounded by a community that would not let her forget. Even after she had fully recovered, building a rich, productive life, juggling a full-time job, cultivating a garden, and raising 6 other children with boundless love, some people still threw that early bout of depression in her face, using it as a weapon to question her capabilities as a human being. Yet, In a profound twist of fate, the scales of karma would eventually balance. As Aunt Isabel aged and lived a very long life, she became unable to care for herself. It was Beverly, the very daughter she had claimed, who became her devoted caretaker for years, day in and day out. Other nieces and siblings were present, but none stepped forward with the same unwavering dedication. And then, just last year in 2025, a final, haunting layer to this story was revealed. I discovered that my oldest sister, Beverly, the child at the center of this decades-long silent struggle, carries a different name. In fact, she has many names, identities I never knew she possessed. This revelation cracks open the past, leaving one to wonder what other secrets were buried in the painful choice a young mother was forced to make, and what it truly cost everyone involved. Timeless cycle of fashion. In the 1960s, my mother, then a young woman, obtained employment at the local Ask the Fan grocery store in St. Kitts. She then saved her earnings to make a special purchase, a beautiful new pair of shoes from Bata. The cost of the shoes was $5 Eastern Caribbean currency, a substantial sum in that era. She invested not just in footwear, but also in a sense of pride and a step toward her own independence. This was her memory of her second pair of shoes. She walked into work the next day, her heart buoyed by the excitement of her purchase. She could never have anticipated the reaction that awaited her. Instead of the admiration she hoped for, her new shoes drew laughter. The whispers began, then grew into open laughter. Her coworkers teased her, cruelly dubbing the shoes stone crushers. The term unlocked a floodgate of memories, hurling her back to her school days and her first pair of shoes, a gift from her aunt that had been mocked with a similarly hurtful, crude label. In a moment, the joy of her hard-earned purchase was shattered, a memory that would linger long after the shoes themselves had worn out. The shoes themselves are dust, but the sharp sting of that moment remained for years. Fast forward to 2022, when fashion performed its most poetic about-face. The very style of shoes once mocked as stone crushers was trending. For my mother, this revival was more than a stylistic shift. It was a bittersweet validation, a living lesson in the relentless, cyclical nature of taste. She recalled the wise counsel of our neighbor, the late Mrs. Dorothy Jeffers, who was a pillar in our community during her lifetime, to see beyond the moment's trend. Buy what speaks to you, even if it's out of fashion, she would often say. Today's cast-off is often tomorrow's coveted treasure. In our current age, dominated by fast fashion and disposable trends, Mrs. Jeffers' wisdom rings with a new urgency. My mother felt a compelling need to pass this lesson on to warn the younger generations against the hollow chase for the new. She saw how the pressure to conform pushes young people toward poor choices, compromising their financial security and even their well-being for a fleeting moment of social acceptance. This reflection carries profound emotional weight. It transcends footwear and fabric. It is about the legacy of values we choose to uphold in a world shouting for more. The true crux of the matter is this: authentic style is not purchased. It is cultivated. It is the confidence to wear your history, your individuality, and your conscious choices. By embracing our personal stories, we can break the corrosive cycle of envy and build a more sustainable, authentic approach to life itself. Proverbs 31 verses 25 to 26. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. Chapter 9, Maternal Relatives. The Path to Spooner's Village. When Mammy arrived in St. Kitts as a young woman seeking employment and a future, she carried the weight of a daughter left behind. Yet her path led her to the one place that had always meant unconditional acceptance, her maternal family in Spooner's Village, Caen. There, she was not a young woman who had lost her child, but a beloved daughter returned. They welcomed her with open arms. Their embrace offered a sanctuary for her grief and a foundation for her resolve. This homecoming began a new chapter, one deeply rooted in the strength and history of the maternal line that had always been a part of her story. To fully understand Mammy's journey, we must now return to her origins. This chapter reflects on the makeup of her biological family, the foundational network of kin that shaped her from the very beginning. From the 1950s through the 1970s, Spooner's Village was not just a place on a map, it was a vibrant epicenter of life, a testament to a world built by hand and heart. The land itself was profoundly fertile, a generous provider that yielded a bounty of sweet potatoes, nuts, mangoes, and guavas. Aunt Lucille, who resided in the estate house, commanded a vast tract of this fertile land, a personal Eden. But the true wealth of Spooner's Village was not just in its soil, it was in the boundless talent of my great-aunts. They were artisans in the truest sense. They sewed all their own clothes and those for their children, and their homes were galleries of creativity, meticulously ordered and adorned with beautiful, handmade crafts. For 2 decades, Mammy grew up remotely from the maternal family she had scarcely known, the aunts who were, in truth, nearly her sisters. Fate, however, had not finished writing her story. As a young woman, a pull from the past drew her back to St. Kitts. It was there that she deliberately sought to rekindle the relationship with her maternal aunts, a bond that had been paused by tragedy and was now ready to be reclaimed. The aunts of Spooner's Village. This reunion forged a connection so profound that, to outsiders, they appeared to be sisters. For me, their homes in Spooner's Village became a place of legend. Every few weeks as a child, Mammy would take me to visit them. A journey there felt like a voyage to a distant America. Sometimes, she would even let me spend a week with them during the long summer vacations, a cherished immersion in the heart of our maternal lineage. Our departure from these visits was always a ritual of abundance. I would leave with a bag full of the earthy scent of peanuts, sweet potatoes, and yams, the sharp tang of sarsop, and the sturdy weight of breadfruit and mangoes. Alongside this harvest were sometimes carefully folded clothes, passed down from my older cousins, Yvette and Katsy, each tiny dress a soft, outgrown relic of a childhood just ahead of my own. I was profoundly blessed to have intimately known these 4 remarkable women, Auntie Lucille, Auntie Marian, Auntie Henny, and Auntie Rosalie from afar. They treated me not as an occasional visitor, but as one of their own. My most cherished and cleverly orchestrated ritual came at the end of each visit to Spooner's Village. As I prepared to take the bus home, I would make my rounds, and each aunt would press a small, loving stipend into my hand. I always eagerly anticipated this gift. With the cunning only a beloved child possesses, if one aunt had momentarily forgotten, I would linger, repeating the phrase, "Auntie, I am leaving now," a few times. As if by magic, the reminder would spark her memory, and the precious stipend would appear, a final token of affection to carry me home. In those moments, I was not just receiving a few coins, I was learning the unspoken language of family love, a language of generosity, gentle reminders, and endless care. The Tuesday Pilgrimage. When Mammy retired, her devotion crystallized into a sacred, personal ritual. She visited her 2 surviving aunts who remained at Spooner's, alone on a weekly basis. The day of the week that she assigned for the visit was Tuesday. Every Tuesday, without fail, she was destined for her pilgrimage to Caen. It was a testament to a loyalty chosen, not merely given. She never missed a Tuesday. Not one. This unwavering ritual continued until a final, quiet Tuesday arrived, the day her independent walking ended. The path she had chosen and faithfully treaded for decades was finally closed to her, not by a single catastrophe, but by the creeping, cumulative shadow of many minor strokes. That was why the weekly visits ceased, leaving only the echoes of a profound story of loss, return, and devotion that spanned a lifetime. The path to Spooner's Village might have closed with her final Tuesday, but the love and kinship Mammy so diligently wove throughout her life remains an unbreakable and enduring legacy. The family's artistic inheritance. The profound talent of my mom and my great-aunts was not a solitary flame, but a fire they successfully kindled in the next generation. They passed their genius on, and their children, my cousins and siblings, inherited that same extraordinary ability to see potential where others saw only waste. This was the family's true inheritance, not material wealth, but an alchemical skill for transformation. Their artistry was both practical and breathtaking. One cousin crafted elegant bags from discarded ice cream kits. At the same time, Auntie Marion and Auntie Lucille did something similar with Clorox bottles, transforming them with designs from other containers and finishing them with crocheted borders or colorful wool. My cousin Licia Burrowsberry intricately transformed ordinary Barbie-like dolls into attractive classy figures by decorating and dressing them in sophisticated, elegant hand-stitched and crochet gowns. She also created sophisticated cushions with intricate folds and buttons that looked like very expensive masterpieces. This was more than a hobby. It was a philosophy of creation. This creative spirit touched everyone. Even my brother Dwight, despite a busy work schedule, carries the family's arts and craft bug. He finds solace and joy in meticulously building model airplanes and other intricate crafts, such as designing business signs and other toys from paper and wood. A testament to his skill, I proudly display in my home a detailed, handcrafted map of St. Kitts and Nevis that he made himself. Perhaps one of the most stunning testaments to this legacy is the elegant, well-furnished dollhouse that my sister Deborah crafted for me during her visit here to Lawton, Oklahoma. With breathtaking ingenuity, she constructed this miniature home entirely from scrap materials that would have otherwise been thrown into the garbage. It stands as a beautiful, tangible symbol of our shared legacy, ensuring that beauty is never born of newness alone, but of a visionary heart that reimagines and elevates the world around us. Legacy in soda covers. Reflecting on the rich area of family stories and creativity, I am reminded of how deeply my mother's lessons in resourcefulness were woven into the very fabric of my own life's work. When I founded my preschool in 1985, I did not have a budget for store-bought toys. But I had something far more valuable, the family gift I inherited. For the entire first year, the children's primary educational toys were not plastic imports, but beautiful, functional creations made from discarded soda covers. We transformed these humble objects into musical instruments, counting aids, and colorful floor mats. The preschoolers also treasured empty thread wheels, which they used like Lego toys. The innovative use of each rattle or wheel and counting frame was more than a toy. It was a testament to a philosophy passed down from my great-aunts through Mammy and now to me. It was living proof that the most powerful tools for learning and creativity are not purchased, but perceived and seen in the everyday objects others overlook, and crafted with the loving, ingenious hands which are my family's truest inheritance. The inherited garden. The love for the land was a universal language in Mammy's family, a sacred inheritance that knew no sides. All of her aunts cultivated gardens. Their yards were vibrant with all sorts of plants they nurtured by hand. This passion for gardening was not confined to her maternal line. It flourished equally in her paternal family. Her brother, Uncle Densmore, is a living testament to this, having created what can only be described as a modern-day Garden of Eden. His yard is a self-sustaining oasis, where he can gather daily fresh fruits and vegetables directly from the soil. This bounty provides nourishment and independence. This deep-seated connection to the earth is clearly woven into the very fabric of our lineage. I must also acknowledge that my own biological father maintained a garden for many years, sharing that same innate bug for planting. I am therefore profoundly blessed for this sacred inheritance. This compulsion to cultivate and create life from the soil flows through me from both sides of my family. It is a double portion of a cherished inheritance, a living bond to my ancestors and the enduring, fertile ground from which we all spring. In Part 3, which chronicles Mammy's determined, resilient, and purposeful life, we will feature a display of creative works by her family, a testament to the ingenuity inherited. This collection will showcase some of the artistic legacy of Mammy's aunts, cousins, children, and grandchildren, who, in the spirit of resourcefulness, often crafted profound beauty from scrap materials. Their work transforms the discarded into the meaningful, honoring a lineage where creativity flourished even from the humblest of beginnings. Chapter 10 Summary. A time for everything. Mammy's life was a living embodiment of Ecclesiastes' timeless wisdom. There was a time to plant, both literal seeds in her cherished garden and the seeds of knowledge in her children's minds, and a time to uproot, as she was wrenchingly transplanted from her aunt's care. There was a time to weep for a mother never known and a daughter lost too soon, and a time to laugh in the simple joy of sewing doll clothes with a friend. There was a time to embrace her children with ferocious love, and a time to refrain from embracing when she had to leave her firstborn behind for a chance at a future. There was a time to search for her mother's story, for stability, for a better life, and a time to give up the exhausting trans-island migration for the rooted stability of home. There was a time to keep silent, bearing the weight of stigma and sorrow, and a time to speak, sharing her stories to forge a legacy. There was a time for war, the fierce battle for her education, and a time for peace, found in her faith, her garden, and the family she built. In every season, Mammy moved with a grace that acknowledged the divine timing of a life fully lived. Her story is a majestic testimony to the truth that within the grand, inevitable cycles of joy and sorrow, planting and harvest, weeping and laughing, a single determined spirit can weave a legacy of breathtaking resilience and love that endures far beyond the sum of its seasons. The story continues. This has been the prologue, the forging of the legend. We have witnessed the making of Mammy, the child of Cain and volcanic rock, of profound sorrow and defiant hope. But what happens when such a spirit steps into her own power? How does the girl who fought for a single penny for lunch build a future for 7 children? What triumphs, loves, and struggles awaited the woman who carried an entire lineage on her shoulders? Her journey from the dusty tug-of-war yard to becoming the cornerstone of a new generation is a tale of breathtaking tenacity, of gardens cultivated in barren soil, and of a love that built a fortress for her family. The foundation has been laid. Now the epic truly begins. To discover how Mammy's unwavering spirit built a legacy that would transcend islands and generations, turn the page to part 2 of her extraordinary story. Part 2. Introduction. The childhood tug-of-war was only the opening act, a fierce, desperate struggle for the right to a future. But what happens when that future arrives, bearing its own weight of betrayal, sacrifice, and heartbreaking loss? In part 2 of Mammy's tug-of-war, the battlefield shifts from the dusty road of a Nevisian village to the treacherous terrain of the human heart. We move beyond the story of a girl fighting for her education to the epic of the woman she became, a matriarch architecting a legacy from the rubble of broken promises. Prepare to witness a legacy forged in fire. Here, the ancient, cyclical wisdom of Ecclesiastes meets the relentless pulse of a Proverbs 31 woman. You will walk with Mammy through seasons of profound betrayal, where the very hands meant to protect become instruments of abandonment. You will stand beside her in the shattering silence of a loss that threatens to unravel a generation. And you will watch, breath held, as she faces the ultimate human crossroads, to fight, to flee, to freeze, or to choose the breathtaking, alchemical path of the fabulous. This is where a tablecloth transforms into a symbol of unbroken dignity, where a barren plot of land becomes a sanctuary of abundance, where a mother's deepest grief is quietly, miraculously, woven into a fortress of love for a motherless child. The tug-of-war is no longer for her arm, but for her soul's legacy, and the choice she makes will echo through every life she touches. Reserve your copy of Part 2. Step into the season of building, of weeping, of healing, and discover how a woman can take the frayed threads of a fractured life and stitch them into unshakable strength. The struggle for survival is over. Now begins the masterful, suspenseful art of creating a legend. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A note on memory, story, and intention. The narrative that unfolds in this story is built upon the foundation of cherished inheritance. Much of the narrative comes directly from my mother's own voice, from the stories she told me while she was alive. Some of these moments were captured and preserved on video, Others live only in the quiet echo of recollection. While I have strived to faithfully represent her words and our shared history, I cannot guarantee that every detail has been recalled with perfect accuracy. Memory is a living archive, one that is both profound and fallible. This account is offered as a faithful tribute portrait drawn from love, legacy, and the indelible, imperfect imprint of a mother's voice. In compiling these memories, my sole intention has been to honor her life and our family's journey. If, in the telling, any perspective is inadvertently overlooked or any recollection causes offense, I offer my sincere apology. That is not, and never was, my aim. This work is an act of preservation, born from a place of deep respect and enduring love. Book Club questions. The opening describes the islands as a stage where heaven and earth collide. How does this epic setting foreshadow the personal drama and profound resilience of Mammy's life? Mammy's mother, Gwendolyn, is a ghost haunting the narrative. Discuss how the dual mysteries of her beauty and her death shape Mammy's childhood and her own fears as a mother. The tug of war is a pivotal physical moment. Beyond the immediate conflict over education, what deeper philosophical battles does it represent, e.g., tradition versus progress, utility versus potential? Aunt Isabel's love is expressed through radical acts of sacrifice, like the tablecloth dress. How does her form of nurturing differ from that of Mammy's father or grandmother's? What does she represent in the story? Resourcefulness is a key theme. From the fishbone needle to the dung-fired potatoes, discuss how scarcity and ingenuity are intertwined. What do these acts tell us about the community's relationship with their environment? The narrative explores the idea of inheritance in many forms: hypertension, a slavery mentality, a green thumb. Which inheritance do you find most powerful or tragic, and why? Mammy finds profound spiritual strength in the impromptu service of song during water collection. How does her faith, contrasted with the community's fear of obeah, serve as her psychological armor? The author framed her research as a quest to understand her grandfather. How does this meta-narrative, the granddaughter investigating the patriarch, affect your reading of Mammy's childhood memories? Ernest Libbard is a deeply contradictory figure, a provider who abandons, a healer who withholds. Did your understanding of him evolve? Can his love and his harshness be reconciled? Discuss the significance of shoes in the story, from the coveted bata slippers to the mocked stone crushers. What do they symbolize about dignity, change, and societal judgment? The story is bookended by maternal loss, Mammy losing Gwendolyn, and then her daughter Grace. How does Mammy's response to the second tragedy reveal how she has been shaped by the first? Food and cultivation are central. Analyze the symbolic difference between the sugarcane, a cash crop of colonial economy, and the breadfruit/yam/gardens, sources of personal and communal sustenance. Mammy's voice is often reported, but we also get the author's perspective. How does this dual narration create a richer tapestry of the past? Whose voice felt more compelling to you? The House of Earth and Cane is described as a humble, spotless sanctuary. What does this specific home, built from the land itself, symbolize about the Farrell family's legacy of dignity and resilience? Community plays a vital role, from wartime survival to raising children. Compare the supportive community of Sister Penny with the judgmental community that whispers about Mammy's postpartum struggle. How does the story portray the double-edged sword of close-knit societies? The story spans a period of immense change, from colonial life to modern immigration. How do the broader political promises, like Premier Bradshaw's vow of shoes for every child, touch Mammy's personal world? Discuss the role of folklore and oral history. How do stories like that of Mimi living to 104 or The Curse on Beautiful Women function as both cultural preservation and a source of trauma? Mammy makes the agonizing choice to leave her firstborn, Beverly, behind. Given the context and stigma she faced, how do you judge this decision? Was it a failure or a strategic sacrifice? The chapter ends with Mammy's vow to educate all her children, breaking the cycle. Having seen her foundation, what core trait do you believe will be most crucial to her success in? There is a section entitled The Legacy of Louisa Farrell, but it clearly sets up Mammy's own legacy. What has Mammy learned from her grandmothers, Louisa, Florence, and her aunt that she will now carry forward to build her own house? A note on memory, story, and intention. The narrative that unfolds in Part 1 is built upon a foundation of cherished inheritance. Much of the narrative comes directly from my mother's own voice, from the stories she told me while she was alive. Some of these moments were captured and preserved on video. Others live only in the quiet echo of recollection. While I have strived to faithfully represent her words and our shared history, I cannot guarantee that every detail has been recalled with perfect accuracy. Memory is a living archive, one that is both profound and fallible. This account is offered as a faithful tribute portrait drawn from love, legacy, and the indelible, if imperfect, imprint of a mother's voice. In compiling these memories, my sole intention has been to honor her life and our family's journey. If, in the telling, any perspective is inadvertently overlooked or any recollection causes offense, I offer my sincere apology. That is not, and never was, my aim. This work is an act of preservation, born from a place of deep respect and enduring love. About the author. Dr. Sheila Hodge Wendover was born in the beautiful Twin Island Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. After discovering she did not graduate high school with the requisite credits to pursue her dream of teaching, she demonstrated extraordinary initiative by founding her own preschool, the Mind Builder Early Group, in 1985 on the front veranda of her mother's home. The exceptional work she was doing with her preschool captured the attention of the federal government of St. Kitts and Nevis, which recognized her profound potential by awarding her a scholarship to study early childhood education in Port of Spain, Trinidad. Upon returning to her home country, she immediately began diligently attending evening classes. It was during this period of dedicated advancement, after her government-sponsored training in Trinidad, and while attending these evening classes, that her foundational work was honored with the prestigious 1990 Caribbean Youth of the Year Award. Her successful completion of the evening classes qualified her for college-level studies and enabled her to obtain crucial college credits from the College of Further Education in St. Kitts and Nevis, now the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College. These credits would later form the foundational stepping stones for her advanced education in the United States. Her professional journey continued to evolve as she served her community in a vital role as a probation officer for the federal government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Her commitment to nurturing her potential further expanded as she specialized in guiding young adults and received a certificate in youth work from the Commonwealth Youth Program and a diploma in youth work from the University of the West Indies. Upon migrating to the United States, the college credits which she earned in St. Kitts transferred to Cameron University in Lawton, Oklahoma, where she earned a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, 2005, and a Master of Science in Psychology, 2007. This academic ascent culminated in her achieving a PhD in psychology, with specialty in health science and behavioral medicine, which she earned from North Central University in 2017. This unique educational pathway, spanning early childhood, youth development, and health psychology, provides her with an unparalleled lens which facilitates profound and lasting personal change. Her path expanded from the classroom to the stage as a certified hypnosis instructor, executive life coach, and founder of multiple organizations. She has also generously shared her knowledge with the next generation, serving as an adjunct professor at her alma mater, Cameron University, from 2011 to the present. A passionate and prolific writer, Dr. Sheila channels her insights into written words. Her literary contributions include the inspirational book, Inspired to Rise. Teachers' Trials and Triumphs was dedicated to the educators who guided her to success. It is in her thrilling narratives, however, that her expertise in behavioral medicine finds a powerful new voice. Her recent psychological thriller, Terminated, Trust No One, masterfully translates her knowledge of the subconscious mind into a compelling narrative lifeline. She continues to expand her literary footprint with 2 recent releases now available on Amazon: The Grace Glitch, Teresa Duncan, Decades of Grace, Resilience and Wisdom, Exit Strategy Part 1. These titles have recently been published. They are joined by forthcoming works such as From Street Kids to Oklahoma, The Dr. James W. Sutton Story, Unbroken, Glad Elementary. The grand culmination of her writing will be a poignant tribute to the life and lessons of her dear mother, Mrs. Iona Barrage, who passed away on February 1st, 2023. This book will be launched in 2026. She recently launched her insightful podcast, UnravelRead.com. She is anchored by her faith, education, and experiences. Serving as the scholarly bedrock for her transformative work, she doesn't just teach change. She provides the blueprint for a rewired and liberated life. Continue the journey. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Your readership is truly the heart of my work, and I am so grateful you chose this story. Craving more true stories? Join me on Substack for free short stories, exclusive insights, and weekly updates delivered straight to your inbox. Become part of the community. https://drsheilahodgewendover.substack.com. Discover my latest books, released 2025. These captivating true stories are available now on Amazon. What every child in St. Kitts and Nevis should know. Inspired to rise, teachers, trials, triumphs. The Grace Glitch, how broken moments become sacred. Terminated, trust no one. Exit Strategy Part 1, Love Was the Promise. Your voice matters. If this story moved you, please consider leaving a review on Amazon. Your feedback not only means the world to me, but also helps other readers discover my work. You can leave a review directly on my Amazon author page at https://www.amazon.com/Sheila-T-Hodge-Windover-Horby-0FWX9LR5 Kiraf=AP_RDRN shopping portal enabled TrueNCCS_ID=398287060. Coming in 2026, a new chapter. I'm thrilled to share these upcoming titles with you soon. Mammy's Tug of War, Iona Barrage's Determined, Purposeful, Resilient Life Part 2 and 3. Exit Strategy Part 2. From Street Kids to Oklahoma, The Heart That Navigated 2 Worlds. Glad Elementary School Part 1. Reserve your next journey. Be among the first to experience these complete stories when they become available for pre-order. Exit Strategy Part 2. From Street Kids to Oklahoma, The Heart That Navigated 2 Worlds. Mammy's Tug of War, Iona Barrage's Determined, Purposeful, Resilient Life. Let's stay connected. For the latest news, behind-the-scenes stories, and more. YouTube, https://www.youtube.com/@drshodge. Author websites: www.unravelread.com, www.drhodgewendover.com, www.mindheartandsoul.com, https://www.facebook.com/profile.php?ID=615871566656663. Thank you for your wonderful support. I look forward to sharing many more stories with you. Warmly, Dr. Sheila's Bookshelf.